So welcome again to Ecologies of Justice and today's session on food in the context of incarceration and reentry. And just a couple of reminders before we get started that first of all, the sessions is being recorded. And secondly, that we have one more, this is our second to last session. We have one more session coming up next week at the same time. And you're certainly welcome to join us for that. And you can check out the website, ecologiesofjustice.org, which I'll put in the chat momentarily, where you can read the full presenter bios and the schedule. So welcome in everyone. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, who's going to introduce today's session on food in the context of incarceration and reentry. So
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you. And everyone, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. It's great to see who's on with us today and where folks are calling in from. And it's great to see many familiar faces on here as well. So welcome again, everyone. We all who are on the panel today spend a lot of time talking about the harms that are caused by prison food, talking about the profound impacts on physical health, mental health, people's sense of identity and human dignity. And I'm sure that many of you have become familiar with this as an issue. So today's panel, we're really going to spend some time talking about the flip side of food rather than being used as a tool for violence and oppression, really being used as a tool to support reentry, to mitigate the harms that are caused by incarceration, and to help aid in dismantling some of the structures that drive mass incarceration. So I'll be moderating today. Again, my name is Leslie Soble. I lead the Food in Prison Project at Impact Justice. And we have some wonderful panelists today, one of whom is still struggling to sign on. So please be patient as we hopefully are able to get him on as well. But in just a moment, I'll have our panelists introduce themselves. But today you can hear from my wonderful colleagues, Wayne Williams from the Food Trust, Cara Santino from Emerge and the Restorative Justice Food Project, and Kurt Evans from the End Mass Incarceration Dinners, as well as Down North Pizza in Philadelphia. So again, we're really happy to have you all here with us today to really listen to some stories, some case studies of organizations that are really working on not just having folks heal from the physical harms of food and eating while incarcerated, but really helping folks to thrive during reentry. So we'll take a few minutes now to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. So panelists, as you know, please tell us a bit about your work at your respective initiative or organization, and share with our audience today a little bit about what has been your journey in getting involved into this work, as well as a little bit about what your respective projects and initiatives entail. So we'll start with Wayne Williams from the Food Trust.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie said, I'm Wayne Williams. I'm with the Food Trust, and I've been working with the Food Trust since 2019. But to give you a little background on the Food Trust is a 30-year organization and initially started focusing on underrepresented communities to help them develop not only the education related to nutrition education, but also to make sure that they had access to healthy foods. We did this for over like 30 years, and we was working in schools, libraries, adult centers. In 2017, we began to take a look at another demographic, and that was particularly those that was incarcerated and those that was coming home, returning citizens. And we began to realize that they too had a great need, not only for the nutrition education, but they also had a great need to have access to not just healthy food, but affordable food. We started also working with recovery organizations as well. And what I started was in 2019, I began to work in Riverside Correctional Facility here in Philadelphia, which is particularly a female prison, and teaching nutrition education to them and trying to connect them with the importance of nutrition education, not just for themselves, but for their families when they return home. Because part of the things we realized in doing the research is that and I need to also add that I'm a returning citizen myself. And I'll give you a quick story to close out. After doing so many years of incarceration, which was actually 35, coming home and doing just basic shopping, what people generally take for granted, the first experience that woke me up that was related to food was a shopping trip that I went on myself. And I was with my sister at the time, and we went, of course, in the supermarket, we picked up a lot of items. And then when we began to get to the checkout counter, and I began to take the stuff out that I had and look at the stuff that she picked, everything that I had picked for myself was everything that I would have eaten inside of prison. It was at that moment then that I realized that even though I was free, I still had the same eating habits, which of course are not healthy eating habits from inside of a prison system, but I brought them home with me. And as I began to look at that, I didn't only bring that home with me, I began to look at other returning citizens and realize that mothers and fathers that was formerly incarcerated, they was also bringing this home to their children. And that was a dangerous thing to do, to begin to teach their children how to eat unhealthy. So I thought that if we can help each other to get a better understanding of the value of nutrition, that not only will we be able to eat better, food is a connecting component to humanity. When you can take a son and a daughter in a kitchen and cook with them, it's not about the food, it's about that experience. And so I began to look at ways in which that we can present this information to this particular demographic in a way that they would not just see an apple as eating an apple a day, but I wanted them to understand that eating healthy is the beginning of thinking about being healthy. When you can help people to understand how important it is to be healthy, for me, it's the beginning of changing the quality of life that they have. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Wayne. And thank you for sharing some of your own personal story as well. I know it's always really powerful for folks to hear that. Next, we'll go to Kurt Evans of the End Mass Incarceration Dinner Series and Down North Pizza. Kurt, over to you.
Hey, how you guys doing? Thank you, Leslie. My name is Kurt Evans. I'm a chef, also an activist in the city of Philadelphia. Several years ago, in the time of doing a lot of work with food insecurity and as a chef, same story as like Wayne said, I had an uncle who was a returning citizen, and seeing his like eating habits and things like that, and also like hearing a lot of him and his friends' stories, it led me to start this dinner series called EMI and Mass Incarceration Dinner Series, where we bring people together. Storytelling is very transforming. And we got people together over meals to start telling their stories. And I invited local policymakers, people that's been affected by mass incarceration, district attorney, judges, all to these dinners, so we can come to understanding of the factors that lead someone down to a road of mass incarceration and help with reentry and things like that. So been doing the dinner series since 2016. During that time frame, I was offered a job in New York for a nonprofit called Drive Change, where I became the culinary director, and I taught the youth ages 18 to 25 culinary skills that were coming directly home from like Rikers. Like, I mean, it was like literally kids that were coming out of the Rikers Island. Probably heard about it because we did a lot of advertising in Rikers for our cohorts, and kids would come out, and we did cohorts that was for 12 weeks. And then after the training, we partnered them with a restaurant in New York. After that, I took on a culinary director job at the Dough Fund, which also was a homeless shelter. But the homeless shelter, it really wasn't focusing on mass incarceration. But as my work went on, I realized 90% of the men that I was help servicing had been formerly incarcerated. So I started having conversations about homelessness and mass incarceration and the reentry system. And from there, came back home to Philly, lost my job due to COVID, co-founded a pizza shop called Down North Pizza. The main premise of Down North Pizza is to exclusively hire individuals that's been formerly incarcerated. teach them essential skills, soft skills, help with resume building, do a lot of our partnerships with state and local agencies, get them other like education needs, housing needs, things like that. And now today we rebooted the EMI dinner series, Stories of Resilience, where we have dinners where we highlight individuals that are coming home in the community and they are doing work in the communities like gun violence prevention, food insecurity, things like that. So we've been highlighting these individuals, raising money for them and their organizations. And as of 8 months ago, I withdrew from Down North Pizza and signed my ownership equity over to the starting employees. They work with my former partners that I had. So.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Thanks for sharing your story and the multiple initiatives and efforts that you've been doing in this reentry space. Next, we'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Cara Santino.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cara Santino, as Leslie said. I'm a co-founder of the Restorative Food Justice Project at Emerge in New Haven, Connecticut, where we work on issues of prison injustice and food insecurity and how they're tied together, especially in our small city of New Haven, Connecticut. And before I go into the program, I have 15 years of experience in culinary arts. I'm a former chef. And what led me to this work is I was always trying to find roles when I was cooking in kitchens that were social justice oriented. And in 2015, I got a position in Boston at the Haley House Bakery and Cafe, which has a training program for formerly incarcerated men and women to teach them how to bake and teach them in catering administration. So basically a workforce development program in the heart of Boston for people coming home, and really just the people who I met and the relationships that I formed, it made me take a more critical look at the prison system in the US and what is and isn't being done, and just, you know, doing that on the ground work with people. And you know, like I worked with a woman who had a hard time getting her driver's license after coming back home and getting ownership and getting her daughter back again. So that started my work with the Restorative Food Justice Project, which I founded 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic. And in that project, we have classes on food systems education, where we talk about injustice in the food system and racial injustice in the food system, income injustice in the food system and the prison system, but also celebrating stories of resistance. We had a couple of culinary arts classes, some sustainable agriculture classes. This year, we launched a food and farming entrepreneurship pathway and youth mentorship pathway. Just having different topics that we can focus on that are all related to the food system and the systemic issues that are, you know, involved in the food and the prison system. So I've been doing that for 2 years, and it's just been really amazing work because it's something that hasn't really been addressed in Connecticut.
Thanks so much, Cara. And I see we have our last panelist is finally on and settled in. So hi, Ra, thanks so much for joining. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties getting you on. So glad you're here with us today. We're obviously still at the beginning. Folks are just introducing themselves and telling us a bit about their work and their journey to getting involved in this work. So Ra, I know you are a food entrepreneur and also involved in Emerge and Restorative Justice Food Project with Cara. So if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and take a few minutes to tell us about your work and your journey. Hang on one second, you're muted.
You hear me?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. But basically, my name is Ra. I came out of prison in 2022. No, 2020. I did 7 years. And like you said, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm with this great program called Emerge in New Haven, Connecticut. And like I said, when I was locked up and I did 7 years, like food and this eating, enjoying meals, like being outside, we take it for granted. But being locked down and go through a situation, you see how value it is. And then this coming home, trying to get jobs and, trying to get employed and trying to get on the right foot. And you got all these programs that saying that, they felon friendly and they want to help and they want to provide. But when you go out there and you go through all the little loops and interviews, and when it comes to the end, they got to let you go because they did a background check. So entrepreneur, I feel like I've always been an entrepreneur before I got locked up. And, when I came home, I feel like it was always in me. And I feel like, people in my situation and people who also look like me, I feel like that's the best thing we could do for ourselves. For me, the key to happiness or any peace of mind is really like locking in and securing your future and securing your presence. And for me, entrepreneurs is basically spelling that. You got certain cultures and certain, religions too, that believe in the value of eating together, believe in the value of food, believe in the value of this growing and coming together. I'm in the same program as Carol was saying, food justice. And basically like we teach or we try to instill, it is basically like just being an entrepreneur. Just being an entrepreneur, giving back to your community and just making a way for yourself. So that's kind of summing up. Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing.
Thanks so much, Ra. Thanks so much for joining us. And again, I'm so glad we were able to get you on after the fun Zoom difficulties that we're also used to these days. So as you all can see, these are panelists who work deeply with communities who are impacted and who have taken multiple approaches to really transforming folks' experience and transforming the ways that we think about folks who are incarcerated and really addressing the issue of food inside by addressing food upon reentry and using food as a tool. So as we move into the next part of our panel discussion, now that you've had a chance to meet all of our panelists, we'll pose a few questions and have our panelists discuss their experiences, their thoughts on these questions. We will leave some time at the end for audience questions. So if anything comes up for you, please feel free to post a question in the chat and we'll try to get to it at the end. Or, if you think of something at the end when it's audience question time, we're happy to take questions from you all. So back to the panelists. As we know, there are so many ways that incarceration causes harm, through food and through a million other means of, causing trauma. As well as so many factors that complicate a smooth reentry and so many larger structural inequities that are involved with the current criminal legal system. So given this massive obstacle, this massive challenge, tell us a little bit about why you've chosen to focus your work on food and why you believe food is such a powerful tool for addressing different aspects of reentry. And whoever wants to go for that first, go ahead and put your hand up or unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. Food, by trade, I'm a chef. So food is something that I'm familiar with. I'm constantly at the time it was 14, 16 hours a day working around food, preparing food, receiving it. So to me, I wanted to use food as a vehicle to bring people together to the table. I found the way of using my platform as a chef because as the structural, like being a chef also also comes from a structural place as well, where it's hierarchy and it's dictatorship. So pretty much and at one point in time, chefs never really outspoken about issues. So I just wanted to use my platform as a way to use food as a vehicle to bring people to the table. I always thought food was something that was like everybody may not drink coffee, everyone may not have drinks, food. I've never asked anybody like, hey, you want to meet up over lunch, and they ever turned it down. So it's like food is a way to get people to the table. Food, also for me being a Black American, food was also a way of like liberation and organizing for us at a lot of points in life. So so I just wanted to tap into my roots of that, but also with the problem is mass incarceration, which at the time when I started the EMI dinners, pretty much a lot of people were just getting to like understand the new Jim Crow, the 13th, that documentary had came out. Also the Collie Browder story came out. So a lot of people were actually, understanding mass incarceration. Not so many people from one generation, but a newer generation starting to understand mass incarceration. So bringing people together over food to talk about mass incarceration was it for me, but it was also who else could I put in the room? And I wanted to put, I have a really good relationship with our district attorney in the city of Philadelphia. So Larry Krasny came to a few of my dinners. I'm also a local organizer. So I do a lot of work around our electoral judges. So I'm actually as of last week, I just became the chair for JAT, our Judge Accountability Table, where we hold a 2-day forum where we question the judges on why, you should be a judge and a lot of these things. So, I invited a lot of judges I've met over the way, lawyers, victims of mass incarceration, and people who have been victims of crimes of people who have been incarcerated. So, we wanted to bring all these people together over food, tell stories, and bring community together. So that's why I chose the path.
I can go next. Actually, I ended up in the food reentry project really by accident. I was with another nonprofit organization, and we was looking at, reentry as a whole and trying to figure out how we could improve reentry for those that was being released from prison. During that time, we was doing a research project, and the research project, in short, was trying to determine how well people was doing 3 years after being released from prison. And so we began to do interviews, and I did these interviews that most of them was like for 90 minutes. And the shocking thing for me was not the interviews itself, but what was shocking to me is how those interviews affected me as a former incarcerated individual. I began to realize that there was many issues that we had that stemmed not just from prison. Many of them stem from prior to going to prison, trauma, stress. All of this was affecting our ability to function within society, or function in terms of making informed, good, clear decisions. Now, one would say, then what does food have to do with that? Food caused me to, when I take a step back and look at food, food is not, and what I've learned in the last 3 years in studying food, food is not about the food itself. Food is really about nutrition. Nutrition is actually a medicine. It's just as valuable. Research has come out recently to confirm that food and nutrition is really helpful in managing stress, trauma, helping those that's in recovery. When we have a good nutritional system, it helps us to recover from the day-to-day damage of life. And so in that research that I was doing, what I noticed as I was interviewing people, that there was something wrong with our ability to explain simple issues. And that caused me to wonder, what was it about us that we could not just make a complete sentence? Certainly culture has something to do with it. Certainly environment has something to do with it. And certainly the years of incarceration have something to do with it. But what I looked at, as I began to look at this deeper, it also had a lot to do with the lack of nutrition that we was taking in on a daily basis, because it has a direct effect on how our brain cells are developed, how our brain cells function. All of this has really something to do with nutrition. So nutrition, to me, is like a medicine to help us to be able to recover from the damage, not just of incarceration, but the years of damage that we have suffered as people in poor neighborhoods, going to prison, in poor schools. You know, in the early days, we began to realize that our children could not read and study in an early age because of the nutritional or lack of nutrition that they was receiving. As a result of that, we began to try to develop a nutrition program that will allow our children's brains to form and become effective in classrooms where they could study. Research now suggests that that same method could be and should be used when it comes to trauma, stress, and all the other elements that most returning citizens suffer from. So nutrition is a way in which to try to begin the process to heal a damage.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up, just the point about the impact of nutrition on the brain and on mental health and on just basic ability to function, I think is something that so often gets overlooked, as most people just tend to focus on sort of more physical aspects. So thank you again so much for bringing that up.
I know for me, I kind of got real serious about the cooking and as far as like what I eat and, you know, digest when I was locked up. I had more time to study. I had more time to really tap in with myself and see that the foods that we was getting in the prison system and some of the foods we ordered on commissaries number poison. So when I began to do that, I remember, like, not what the last brother was saying, but the first brother was saying, I kind of like built a community within the prison as far as with brothers, as far as like putting meals together, as far as like basically trying to keep it healthy and cooking and keep that balance. And I really like cooking, because for me, I can't really draw like that, but I've always been a fan of art. So far, like when I fix these meals and when I do like my baked goods, it's kind of like my art. So now I kind of, you know, express myself without really have to say nothing. So I feel like I'm putting the part of me out there, and I'm also helping people because I do vegan. So I still try to, you know, do the sweets because, you know, by nature, most people do like sweets, but I try to give a little balance to it by bringing the healthiness and try to just put more light on something that people really don't know about, or something that really kind of scared to like invest in and tap into. And I did so much study on it, like most of my vegan food, you can't even tell the difference. You would think it's not vegan. So this having a like alley for me to do my art, and this having a way for me to kind of help people introduce to a new way of life and a healthy life, that's something I always appreciate. And that's something I always trying to just get more knowledge about and deal with. Because, you know, you got some, for me, that was so serious. You know, you got some people that can't order commissary. You got some people, like the brothers were saying earlier, they don't have enough money to buy the food and buy all the nourishment that they need. So when you kind of forced to go on the resources of God, you kind of see that inner strength in you. You kind of see that inner willpower and that knowledge that you have, and it just more weights and more in you. So that was kind of like my motivation, this bringing my art out and having like an alleyway I can kind of help people and assist.
Wow, that was really beautiful, just the way that you just phrased that about the food also being your art and a way to express a piece of yourself. That's just, you know, I feel like everyone here today is just hitting the points that we try to make so many times about how food is so much more beyond like physical health, but like really impacts every part of our being and who we are and the way that we communicate as people. So thank you. And sorry, Kara, I see you're about to come off mute.
No, it's okay. We could move on to the next question, or do you want me to answer this one too?
No, go ahead. If you want to answer, go ahead.
No, it's just, I mean, similar to what everybody said. I mean, food is so widespread and everybody relates to it. And food has always been, also as a chef, food has been my biggest passion, because I would cook to take me out of, to get to that headspace where I was calm in a place of chaos growing up. And then also to prepare the food to make people happy, to try to like make the chaos less severe. And I've just been doing that ever since I was a kid, and also just seeing throughout my life that food is just the ultimate tool of power, of resistance. It has the power to make people so incredibly happy or so incredibly sad. And I think I know it's very, very important that we continue to have these discussions about food and how it's related to incarceration, because they're so connected, and that, yeah, we just need to keep having those discussions, because it's also connected. It's connected to housing when you get out. It's connected to having a car. Like, it's making, like, am I going to pay for rent or am I going to pay for food? It's just connected to everything. So.
Thank you. And thank you all. I know that's such a big question, and thank you all for answering that so beautifully and eloquently. I'm like getting emotional just listening to you all, and I'm actually receiving some direct messages from folks that you're making them cry with your beautiful words. So thank you all again for sharing your thoughts on this. Moving into the next question, taking it from a little bit more of the sort of big picture theoretical to a bit more of the practical, because I know we have a lot of folks who are very concerned with, not just the the beauty and the big issue of food, but really looking at the practical aspects of some of the programming and work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about some of the benefits for the individuals who participate in the various programs that you all currently run or have formerly run, since I know several of you have been involved in multiple programs impacting incarcerated folks and formerly incarcerated folks. And tell us not only how your initiative and how your work contributes to directly to people who've experienced incarceration, but also how it ripples out to impact and benefit their families and communities. And we'll kick it over to whoever wants to start first.
Yeah, I'll start. When I was, I want to say like one of the most impactful things I've seen when I was dealing with, when I was at Drive Change. And when I got to Drive Change, previously they had two chefs that were like two chefs from like restaurants, but culturally they didn't know the kids. So it was like, once I got to know the kids culturally, I'm from Philly, they're from New York. It's still a cultural barrier, but once I got to learn the kids, it was easy to like connect with them. And some of the benefits from the program of like, I remember one kid, he was on house arrest, and he became valedictorian. I cooked at the James Beard house that year, and I brought him along with me. And he told his family like, I cooked at the James Beard house, and his family's like, I don't know who James Beard is. And he's like, no, he's like, they told him, he's like, oh, he's a chef. He did these. And it's like to be a chef, you get an award. It's like the Grammys, explained it to him. But a lot of the kids from the program, it dropped Change, which is still going on. It actually rebooted up after the pandemic and restaurants picked back up. But one of the main things that I've seen out of the 3 cohorts that I did there, the kids started learning a level of independence, because we set them up with financial classes. So not only just coming cooking, they really got a lot of essential skills. Coming in, I started, my teaching style was pretty much group work for the kids, because coming from a lot of different backgrounds. Some people may audio learners, visual learners. So just basic textbook stuff wasn't cutting it for me. So put them in the groups. They pushed each other, teamwork. Don't mean to brag, but my first cohort there, I had a 80% graduation rate from the first week to the second week. And well, not the second week, but the second portion of the program was restaurant work. So we signed all our kids up for restaurants, and pretty much I've been going from Drive Change about 2 years now. and I still keep in touch with a lot of kids, but a lot of them still are at like restaurants. A few of them are managers at positions, but from the conversations that I've had with them, it was always about like, hey man, I was able to like come home, cook for my family, you know, teaching them like recipes and certain ways, even budget friendly. Like, you know, I'm like, hey, you get a whole chicken, you break it down, you know, hey, you got the thighs, you got the breast, you got the legs. You can, once you break the chicken down, you can use this. Also going back to a lot of basic work of like, a lot of the kids were getting CSA boxes. They would get the boxes and it's like, hey, they get a box and they're like, I don't know nothing about turnips. I don't know nothing about, you know, root vegetables. So one day I would bring one of the boxes in the class and we cook out of the box. So when they got that, so it's like now when their grandmom gets the box, they can go help grandmom cook. So a lot of independence. And these, like I said, these kids, they did few months in prison, Rikers Island, but coming home, being able to say, hey, I could take care of myself. You know, once I go soup, I don't have to like spend my money at the bodega on like, you know, chopped cheeses and things like that. They were able to actually say, hey, you know, I can take this box and I know how to like make a stock. You know, hey, I could break this chicken down and make this meal last longer. So yeah, a lot of that stuff was really important. That was one of the like most impactful. Even at the Dough Fund, we still did similar work like that as well, because a lot of the men, like, now these were men that was like old enough to be my father, that was like, you know, I never really had cooking experience like that. So now I'm teaching guys like, hey, you know, we can make some bread, you know, baking bread, doing things like that. So it was really good in these programs, teaching people how to pretty much be self-sufficient, nutritional in their cooking in their day-to-day life.
I would say for me, the most important aspect of this work is really restoring dignity. You know, it's not about the food. The food and the nutrition education class and component, they're just tools. But the ultimate aim and goal is to be able to restore what has been lost in the participants, dignity. You know, when we think about malnutrition, we look at it, of course, in terms of food and not being able to get enough food and not being able to get enough vitamins and nutrition. And that's true. But when you look at that principally and then look at the malnutrition in terms of mentally, spiritually, psychological, that for me is the most important part of understanding nutrition, to restore belief, to restore hope. Because to give a woman or a man, you know, good food and ignore what's taking place in them internally that won't allow them to continue to eat good food, to continue to change the quality of life that they're in, then that is not really sustainable. But if we can restore their belief, their hope, their dignity, we give them life. And the food is about giving them life, but it's not about just giving them physical life. It's about giving them mental life. It's about giving them hope. So when I talk to participants in my program, initially, to be honest, when I first started, I would start off with the nutrition education component. And as I began to look at them, they really didn't buy into that because they didn't understand the relationship to nutrition, health, and their everyday life. Because of course, they have some real life issues. So we have to be able to connect those real life issues to what it is that we're teaching to make it make sense and show them how they can use those tools to be able to not just eat healthy, but to live healthy. And I don't think any human being can really live healthy if they don't have the self-dignity that they need. We need to be able to restore that as part of the food, as part of the nutrition aspect. We need to be able to restore what they are lacking in terms of mentally and psychologically. We need to rebuild that as well as rebuilding their body.
I know for me, I'm extremely grateful
I've been part of a program called Emerge, and through Emerge and Carol, we had this class called Food Justice. So food justice, it basically breaks down the history of like Hispanics, Indians, and African Americans. So it basically breaking down the history how, all right, when I grew up, I used to read books or look at TV or anything far as farming wise, I always see a European. So when I used to see that, it's not like I accepted it, but it's one thing about the eye. If it constantly see it, you constantly being introduced to it, you're going to believe it. It's going to become second nature to you. So by me constantly seeing Europeans farming, I thought that was never a job issue for me. Only jobs I kind of considered an issue for me that I always see on TV is sports, entertainment. We starring in that all the time. But when it comes down to certain things as far as entrepreneurship with the farming and the crops and the food system, I really don't see us. Not saying we're not in there. I'm just saying it was always presented the other, like the other race, other races, other than my race. So when I took that class and I was getting fed all the information in my history and really seeing that, you know, we did have a hand in this, but we got manipulated. We did have a hand in this, but we got finessed and we got lied to because, you know, like the brother was saying earlier, most of us couldn't read back in the day. So with certain laws and contracts and things being issued that we're not aware of, or certain things that we being passed us to the Indians too and the Hispanics, that we think it's still our land, they're coming to our land and tell us to get off their land. So I know a little bit about history before then, and I knew how we made pig intestines the main course still to this day. And I knew how we always had the scraps and we kind of, you know, did what we did with that, but I never really had the full scope of what we really was doing until I took that class. So I feel like with that class, it kind of gives you the history, it gives you appreciation, it tells you that not only they can do it, you can do it. And like the brother was saying, sometimes you need certain picture and information to get that confidence and get that dignity, get that, you know, self-love so you can push yourself. So at the same time, we're giving you history telling you can be an entrepreneur. There's nothing wrong with waiting. There's nothing wrong with sisters, but sometimes you got to take the ball in your own hands. Because time is never on your time. Time is always moving. And energy is always moving. So with that being in the factor, you need to know your history. You need to have that self-love. You need to tap in. You need to be aware of what's going on around you, because it might come a time where you had to farm for yourself. It might come a time when you have to grow your own crops because inflation is low and there's nowhere else you can go. So by taking that food justice class, we're teaching them the history. We're teaching them how to become farmers. We're teaching them what a farmer might look like. Other than this, a European, it comes in many shades. We teach them self-love, and we teach them to become their own boss. We teach them to take their future and their present in their own hands. Because a lot of time with prison, they teach you to wait on them. Prison teach you to be submissive. Prison teach you to be a pawn and just sit there, and they'll tell you when to go to sleep. They'll tell you when to come out that cell. They'll tell you when to eat. They'll tell you when you can see your family. So a lot of times, brothers and sisters might not have that mind state before they go in, but most of the time, brothers and sisters get a lot of time. And over time, that becomes wearing, and over time, that becomes your new identity. So when you come out, you don't really know how to navigate because somebody always telling you. So now you got mass incarceration because brothers and sisters only gonna go for what they know to go back to a comfortable place. So when you got certain programs and you got certain brothers and sisters teaching that self-love and that entrepreneurship, you can kind of break that code. You can kind of crack that code and you can go in a new direction. Because I won't wish prison on nobody. Nobody deserves prison. Prison is not the answer for your wrongs and your rights. It need to be a new structure inside the prison. But taking that food justice class showed me, and I know it showed other brothers and sisters in there, that sometimes entrepreneurship is not such a crazy idea.
Entrepreneurship is not such a, you know, a wild idea or something that you just can't grab hold of. Being healthy is not that difficult. It's a mindset. Becoming a farmer is not difficult. It's about your will. It's about feeling comfortable to step into that barrier. It's not only a certain social club. It's a worldwide club. Once you get the proper information and the proper confidence and the proper, you know, tools. Tools will only be valid if you understand and you're fine. And we're just trying to give you these tools. So yeah, the food justice class, you know, through Carol and through the great, you know, Emerge program in New Haven, Connecticut, definitely taught me a lot. And I'm definitely grateful for it. And I definitely, you know, helped out and definitely helped the brothers and sisters so they can continue to do the same thing outside of the program and outside of the classroom. Because that's where it starts. It starts from the community. Take this back to your community so we all can prosper. Thank you.
Thank you, Ra. I don't think I could say anything else after that, especially because Ra is in the program. So, but thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing some of those, you know, those benefits to individuals and to folks around them. And, you know, it's very obvious that the work that you're doing is not only helping people who are reentering to survive, but really also to thrive and really come into their own. And, you know, on that note, we all know that this is difficult work to do. There are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of obstacles. And I know, Ra, you just mentioned one of those is that just sort of that mindset, especially for folks who are reentering, that sort of staying in the prison mindset and, you know, not really feeling empowered to make their, you know, your own decisions, you know, or that sense of feeling like really being beaten down by the system. And I'm curious to know, what are some of the other obstacles that you all have encountered in this work, and how do you manage to overcome those challenges?
I could start. I think for me with the restorative food justice program, I started it at the beginning of the pandemic with two members at Emerge, one supervisor and then the director of training and development. So it was a very, very, very small scale thing. And the first issue that I came across, that I know we've all come across, is funding. You know, how do we get funding to run programs like this? There's not that, the way the funding system is set up, often I couldn't apply for grants, just, you know, being me, I had to, and I'm not hired by Emerge. So, and they didn't have the capacity to do this because this was a side project for them. So finding funding, that's been really difficult. And it's such like a, yeah, so finding funding and then resources. Resources are either not there, or there are a lot of barriers, like with starting your own food business. There are the paperwork that you have to go through. Like so we have people come in our food and farming entrepreneurship class like Ra, who are interested in starting a business, but they don't know where to start. You know, you have to figure out your business structure, you have to fill out the paperwork, and it's such a overwhelming process for anybody. And it doesn't help that, you know, these materials are in one language. They use a lot of tough words and jargon, or like when on an application for a food truck, they ask for, you know, your criminal background history. Why is that there? So it's just it's the barriers like that, which are the systemic barriers that are in place. So people cannot, you know, so it's more tough for people to prosper who are interested in doing this work. So the funding, and then lack of resources and confusion with these resources too. That's from my opinion.
Thanks, Kara. I think those are common common barriers that I think probably everyone here is used to, both the funding and the bureaucracy, and just sort of that sense of being able to get started. Anything else that folks would like to add in terms of obstacles or challenges?
I know for me, when it was I know like if you're trying to start something, everything Kara just said was like on point. Pretty much and it took me a while to actually like navigate through that. It was really hard, like understanding like, you know, if you're just getting your 501(c), then it's like getting a fiscal sponsor, knowing those relationships, and then if it's funding around criminal justice initiatives or reentry or food, like learning how to write grants. So like all of that stuff was like really, really, really challenging at first. But for the participants in the program, I've always found it good to show them success stories. Like, you know, guys that I've met that's been formerly incarcerated, not being formerly incarcerated myself, it'll be like, yeah, you could do that. But then it's like, nah, my guy right here, he's a chef, he owns this restaurant, you know, bring them in. And showing them like a lot of individuals that's been formerly incarcerated and they're successful. And I found through all the work that I do, storytelling is like very, very, very transformative. So if someone's like a friend of mine, Glenn Martin, he found Just Leadership. I had him come in and talk to the kids about the work that he did. And the kids, it was funny because like the culinary, I always try to use culinary as like a landing stone. Like, hey, you know, this is like a skill that, you know, don't look at it as like you're cooking for a job, because the cooking is like you just learning that for yourself. You know, you can cook for your husband, your wife, your kids, but a lot of people that I've actually worked with, they spend time in the kitchens in prison cooking. So, and then it's like, I'm talking to them like, hey, when I do catering jobs, I bring a lot of guys. They're like, I don't have experience. I'm like, well, you worked in the kitchen, right? How many people did you feed a day? Yeah, I thought about like, you know, like we're gonna feed that many people today. So it's like, just like, letting them see the buy-in, like getting the buy-in in what you're doing, because like sometimes it's like, and sometimes people that are coming home are also aware of the I want to say the pimps, the hustlers of the nonprofit industry. So they know like, hey, you guys just want me here because you probably got to fill a quota, but actually when you bring, like I said, bring people in, show them that you care. And like I said, half the time I bring people in, and like I said, kids met Glenn and they were like, hey, I want to start my own nonprofit. That's great. That's great. Now you talk to Glenn. You can, Glenn, he's been formerly incarcerated. He also mentors other people that's been formerly incarcerated. So if you want to get some youth, some young guys in, I had a few guys that are actually doing good meal prep programs, guys that are formerly incarcerated. They do workout plans, and they're in the fitness business. So it's like bringing people in to show them success stories I found the way to get buy-in from people into the programs that I've done. So.
Thanks, Kurt. I think those are important challenges as well. Any other challenges that folks want to mention before we move on to the next question? Okay. We will go ahead and move on to the next question then. So I'm curious what you all would like to see happening around food and reentry, whether that is an expansion of some of the current programs, new programs that you might think might be helpful, changes to policy, anything that you wish was happening or would like to see happen in the future.
I want to see policy change. A lot of people have been having these discussions in their communities and in prison, outside of prison, and we've been making, a lot of nonprofits been making programs to fill in the gaps that the government does not take care of or doesn't, refuses to acknowledge. So we really need policy change at the intersection of food and prison, in prison, outside of prison, before prison. It's just like, it's housing, it's everything. It's the job you get when you leave. There needs to be changes to parole. There just needs to be so many policy changes. Like they need to if you want to become a food entrepreneur, then remove the criminal background check requirement on the vending application. So many policy changes that are or even just food related, like opening up cottage food operations across, the country, opening up micro enterprise businesses across the country where people can cook hot food out of their home that, Black and Hispanic people have been doing since the beginning of time. But the government the municipal health departments wants to put caps on that. They want to be the gatekeepers for that. So I would absolutely love to see widespread policy change at the city levels, state levels, federal levels. I want to see people, one of the biggest things I want to see, not related to food, but related to farming, is I want to see people released from prison for cannabis possession. Because why is that a thing? Why? So there's all the policy change. I'll stop.
I know I want to see better diets inside the prison. Because like I said, a lot of times, what I was saying earlier, brothers and sisters, we can't afford commissary. And then brothers and sisters get enough knowledge to know they eat inside that cafeteria. You eating processed food, you eating mystery food, you eating food that's not really cooked all the way. And it's more poisons than anything inside the prison system. I know you asked about outside of prison, but I feel like it needs better diets, better diet programs inside of prison. Prison gets so much money every year, every month. It won't hurt them to add more healthier diets. They have a kosher diet. Down south, they have a kosher diet. They have like a diet for rosters, and that's it. Why we can't have a halal diet? And then the things with them diets, now they're playing mental warfare because they're telling you to denounce your race to go to this kosher diet. And to some people, that's just a pen and a paper. I'm just checking one thing till I'm checking another. And to some people, they're really denouncing who they are as a person and what they believe in the higher power. So they're not going to do it. So now they're forced to keep eating this poison and this mystery meat because they don't have enough money to go to commissary. When they can have more alleys and more opportunities and more options for people to have a healthier diet. So when they do come out, they have a better chance to survive. You got brothers and sisters coming out now with high blood pressure, but they never had that until they went to prison. You got people that's overweight, but they always had their weight they always knew how to like navigate with their weight until they went to prison because they was depressed. So before we need better things going out, we need better things going in too, before we even hit this free world. And I feel like one of the things that we need, and I hope, in the future we can kind of get, is more diets, more healthier diets. A halal diet could be good. A more better vegetarian diet could be good. Everybody doesn't want to eat cold beans and a little bit of salad. You can really switch it up. You can really bring out your art form and make it work for everybody else and have a better choice to survive out here.
Wayne or Kurt, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, the thing I would agree with, everything that was said so far, because it really is understanding the real issues. And, housing, jobs, training, food, all of those are connected. It's not like we are in a position to have the luxury to deal with one problem. We have to deal with all of these. So for me, it's always trying to find and develop a model that will address all these issues. While we may be working within the food industry or the food and nutrition, we have to find a way to create a model that would extend nutrition education to job training and job placement and entrepreneurship. We have to find a way, because everyone may not fit into the entrepreneurship model, but they may fit into the job model. They may fit into other forms of model. So for me is trying to find a creating model that will address the present day reality. The models that we are operating off of are really outdated. I began to work within reentry really in 1982. Then we didn't call it reentry. We called it prison reform or prison ministry. And I used to do volunteer work. The thing that surprised me when I came home in 2017, after contacting close to 63 reentry organizations in the state of Pennsylvania, that most of their models was the same model of the 1980s. Because as she said, the funding is shaping the way in which that we shape our programs. So we have to begin to look at ways to tap into other funding that will allow us to be more creative, that will allow us the flexibility to address some of these day-to-day real issues. Because again, you know, for someone that's just coming home, to try to convince them or talk to them about nutrition, that is, by itself, that is something that's far from that person's mind. Unless we can connect nutrition to job, unless we can connect nutrition to catering services that they can create for themselves, we have to develop a whole system. The idea of continuing to put together pieces and parts is not working. We have to be able to take all these individual pieces and issues and create a system out of them by putting them together in such a way that they work as a system and not as independent parts.
Thank you, Wayne. I think those are all really important points. Kurt, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Wayne 100%, 1000%. Also, I've been, to me, it's been something like Kara said earlier, legislation, but I think work needs to be done around prison legislation, like things that are going on in prisons. I mean, I'm always baffled that prisons have farms and the inmates work the farms, but they can't eat the food. So that's something that's just always mind-blowing to me, that a prison can be self-sufficient, as in I'm seeing these prisons in like different states. You know, you might see some in Maine, you might see some in like Colorado, different places that are like, oh man, we have, you know, they're teaching guys how to make the solar panels to make the prisons run off, all of these things. But it's like, do y'all actually like teach people these skills on like, hey, re-entering society, being able to connect people with like, you can get these jobs on the outside. And like I said, with the work in the farms and then not being able to eat the fruits and vegetables or produce, I think that's just always been something that's been mind blowing to me. So I think legislation around like regulating prisons, like really food, like how they and like the brother said earlier, Ross said earlier about the diets, a lot of this is very important. And even with these contracts, people get contracts to provide commissary meals. I think it needs to be regulation around that, because they're going to buy the meals off someone at a rate, and then they're going to charge them super astronomically high prices also in prison for the food. So it's a lot of things that I think need to be regulated on whether it be a federal level or like a local level when it comes to prison education, job training inside of prisons.
Thanks, Kurt. And I think that, you know, you all had really powerful suggestions for things that could still be done, the work that there still is to do. So any panelists who are listening who work in any of these areas, please get out there, start making these changes. I'm sure our panelists will be happy to, you know, share these ideas with you again. But before we move into audience questions, because we're already starting to get some in the chat, I'd love to give each of our panelists just 30 seconds, and I will time you just to keep us on time. Just one thing that you hope that our attendees will take away from the panel today. If you could pick just one point that you can state in 30 seconds that you hope folks will take away today, and we'll just go around in a quick round before we start taking questions.
Just be open-minded. I hope everybody is open-minded. I hope everybody just really understand what was being said, and like you said, just trying to apply it. Not even if they're part of a nonprofit or not part of a nonprofit, just doing their part.
just doing their part to just help push a better narrative. I said, thank you.
Thanks, Ra.
I guess if I had one thing, it would be if all of us could take away is that this is not an isolated problem. This is not a problem that's just solely related to those incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. This is a problem that affects us all. And the longer we watch this problem, it's growing like anything else that grows. And we need to understand how this problem affects us and how it will affect us in the future so that we can begin to make informed decisions about how we can help minimize the effects of this incarceration, the effects of nutrition, the effects of poverty. All this is tied in together.
Thanks, Wayne.
You know, I would say the fact that everyone's here, you know, you guys are all here. That means you have an interest in, you know, what we're seeing, what we're doing. Like I said, reach out to anybody you can help. Like Kara said, it was like people know people that can help people get funding. And like also Wayne said, this is not an isolated incident. There's a lot of intersection here with other parts of things that's going on. Like I said, homelessness and mass incarceration is a really big link between that as well. So food deserts, food insecurity, it's a lot of these things that are just like linked, because you can look at an area code where it's high mass incarceration and it's a food desert. So a lot of these things are linked. And if you could like find any way to plug in and connect with anybody, I would, you know, just doing it.
Thanks, Kurt. All right, Kara, final word.
Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how, you know, people are really, a lot of people are quick to call people who've been to prison felons and inmates, but instead of doing that, when you're about to do that, think that prison is something that happens to people. And like we said before, nobody wants to be in prison. Most of the reason why people are in prison is because of police brutality, police and everything wrong with them, and racism, and a lot of structural issues. So I encourage all of you to think that people who leave prison are one of our most vulnerable communities in the world, especially in America, where something like 91% of people who leave prison in America become food insecure and don't always have access to fresh, safe, culturally relevant food. So that's a huge statistic. That's 91%. So that's something that, you know, we really just need to pay more attention to and just do our part to protect people who leave prison, because it's terrible. So.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those wise words. So we are starting to get some audience questions in the chat. Our first is from Britt at Farm to Institution New England, or FINE. Hey, Britt. Britt is asking, I'm wondering if the presenters could talk a little more about how working to change food in prisons and jails can be a way to reform the prison system and hopefully end mass incarceration. Do you believe this is possible, and what strategies are most successful? So that's a very big question. Thanks so much for posing that question, Britt. And any panelists want to take a moment to address Britt's question?
I'll take a stab at a part of that. You know, Britt, part of what we do here at the Food Trust, we partner with the county prison on State Road, who has a farm or orchard. And as Kurt said, most of the food that's grown on prison do not make it in the prison. Our objective here is to help the food and produce that's being produced on that at that prison to enter into the prison. Again, this is a step-by-step part to try to create a holistic program and a holistic approach. The prisoners, inmates, people go out and harvest the field and plant. We need to be able to get them to take those same produce back into the prison so that they have access to that healthy food that they produce. In order to do that, we need to be able to partner with prison officials in a way, because we need to educate them, not just about what's taking place. We really need to educate them about the effects of what's taking place. For the most part, prison officials know what is taking place, but they don't really understand the effects of it, internally or externally. And so part of our job is to find, and it's certainly realistically, many prison officials are not going to buy that. I think we need to focus on those that can and those that will. And we need to build relationships with those that still have that belief or is working to improve those conditions and begin to build a coalition with them to gradually begin to strengthen ourselves so that we can start putting some of these pieces together, because what we really need, and I think the most effective thing we need, is proof of concept. We need to be able to prove what we are doing is effective and it will benefit those that's in these programs, as well as their families that they're returning to, the communities that they're returning to. We need to be able to connect these dots to show that we're not just talking about improving the diet of an individual that's incarcerated. We're talking about improving that individual's diet that will have a direct effect on their family and the communities that they return to.
Thanks so much, Wayne. And I see Britt is thanking for the response as well. Did anyone want to add anything to what Wayne said to Britt's question? Okay, then we'll move on to the next question. And folks, feel free to continue to drop questions into the chat if you'd like, or after we ask the next question that's in the chat. If you want to just put up your hand as well in Zoom, feel free to do that as well, and you can ask a question out loud and come off mute. So Carolyn is asking, would love to hear your thoughts about best approaches to teaching nutrition on the inside. I'm going to be teaching a college program inside a youth prison, folks ages 18 to 25, including teaching nutrition and a focus on diabetes in communities of color. I'm wondering and worrying about how it will be for the youth to learn about how damaging the food they're getting can be, high carb, low fresh, low nutritional value food, when they have so little choice. That's such an important question, Carolyn, and something that definitely comes up. Any panelists who would like to address Carolyn's question?
I can. I think that for me, especially when I was teaching cooking classes, it's really important to frame nutrition education, frame nutrition as a structural issue and a systemic issue, and the reason why, and to not, you know, not make people, but just a lot of people feel guilt and shame when they can't eat healthy, because if they can't afford to eat healthy, you know, so there are so many reasons why somebody might eat quote unquote healthy, but definitely framing it as a structural issue, I think, is one of the biggest things when we're talking about nutrition, and knowing that every body is different. People's preferences are different. Some people use food as a means, a lot of people use food as a means of comfort. And yeah, just trying to, I think a lot of traditional nutrition education programs often bring about a lot of shame and guilt for people who don't, you know, who can't afford to eat healthy. So I think my biggest piece of feedback is definitely framing it as a structural issue. And the reason that people aren't getting healthy food in prison is, you know, it's a lot of it is corporate greed. So.
Thanks, Kara. And Kurt, you want to take
Yeah.
a
And when I dealt with like kids this age, because at the end of the day, I know we say I know it was like a thing past, like a study did, where it was like, the brain isn't developed to a certain age. So when I say like you have to make it fun, because at the end of the day, they're still kind of like kids. So showing them, making it cool. Also, like piggybacking off what Kara said, you got to put some like structural context in there, but also like if you knowing like the neighborhoods these people come from, really understanding that and saying like, this is what you'll be getting in your neighborhood. If you know the closest thing that they'll get to like fruits and vegetables like apples and oranges is like really trying to program a lot of the programming around what you know that they would be used to in their community. Because sometimes like I found like, it was good to teach them things that they probably wouldn't never come across. It was like, how likely was they going to implement that in their actual like day-to-day life, but making it also fun as well. Definitely fun and hands-on. I always thought that was like the funnest thing that that was like how I got a lot of feedback and buy-in from what I was doing.
great tips, Kara and Kurt, and I see Carolyn giving you both a thumbs up. So I think that was helpful answers to her question. Thank you so much. Our next question is coming from Becca in California. She says, in California, we do have legislation around plant-based meals in congregate facilities, including prisons, and some initiatives from the department around healthier meals, but they aren't enforced. There isn't buy-in from custody, and the population has no education in why they should care. How can we address these systemic blockades? Again, another big multifaceted question.
So I want to say like, as in my organizing life, you had to put a lot of pressure on like political people. So if your mayor, he appoints someone for this job, you have to put pressure on your mayor. If it's city council work, you have to like apply pressure to people that make decision making. And we sat down and did a lot of power mapping, figuring out who had the power to get what we needed done to achieve, who to apply pressure to, who was with us, who wasn't with us, who's most likely to support things like that. So, putting pressure on people that make decisions is very important. And like I said, I found that very successful here in Philly. I was a part of a group that passed the emergency paid sick leave bill. And we fought back and forth with city council on the number. It went from 50, we took it down to 15 people, because they were saying, with 50 employees that would hurt Black and brown businesses. And I was like, I'm a Black and brown business, and I can't name too many Black and brown businesses. The city of Philadelphia has more than 50 employees. So I think you should lower it down to a number. And we really went through a lot of that, but it took people like me, myself, I had a relationship with a lot of people on city council. So I had to like apply a lot of pressure to people. So I think that's one thing that's really important, applying pressure to people who hold those positions.
I would piggyback what the brother was saying and what the brother was saying earlier, but I would say the families need to get involved, her as well, but the families need to get involved in them prisons, because I know the inmates can say a lot of things, they can voice their opinions, but they're only gonna go so far. But from what I've seen, when the families get involved and they build a relationship with them COs, and they're coming down on the warden, and they're coming down on the higher ups, and they're coming down on the superintendent, it tends to go different. So by them families getting involved and the families stating their concern, and they're stating that, it needs to be more education so these brothers and sisters can adapt to a better lifestyle and a healthier lifestyle, so they come out and be really productive. Because the brother hit on something earlier about far as your mental state when you eating certain things. And always been the term out there, you are what you eat. And it's certain fruits out there and there's certain foods that you can kind of eat and they'll kind of release certain things that help boost that immune system and certain things within your body and puts you in a better state. So I know that family get involved and the family start coming down, the family start writing and family start complaining to the government officials that their family members is not getting the proper education, the proper, treatment and the proper things that's owed to them and that's for them, but they're not being really issued to that, then you'll see a dramatic change. Because that's the taxpayers. So they're not going to play with that, but they can play with the inmate because, you kind of the property of the state. But when it comes to the taxpayers and the people that got more leeway, they'll kind of fall in line. So I think the families and her as well need to start coming down on prisons.
Thanks, Ra. Any other comments on Becca's question regarding those systemic blockades? Okay. We might have time for one final question if anyone has a burning question that they'd like to come off mute and ask or throw into the chat. I'll wait the awkward 10 seconds for anyone to raise their hand or put something in the chat. Okay, well, if anyone thinks of any questions, as we turn this, we've got one, thank you, from Kirk. Many prisons don't have garden space to grow and supplement the diets, and many urban and poor communities don't have community gardens or public space to farm. COVID-19 showed the discrepancies between have and have nots. Build Back Better has many for communities. Okay, so more of a comment than a question, but thank you so much for adding that in there, Kirk. It's definitely one of those obstacles that I think is difficult to overcome. But before we turn this back over to Matt to make a few final announcements about the conference, I just want to say thank you with so much gratitude to Wayne and Kurt and Kara and Ra for joining us today and sharing their stories and sharing more about the work that they do. I know that many of you have been really inspired by their words today. It's always inspiring to hear from you all, and just it's always an honor to share space with you all. So thank you so much for joining this discussion today. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out to me. Again, I lead the Food in Prison Project at Impact Justice, and other panelists, if you'd like to put your info in the chat as well, if you don't mind folks contacting you, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm happy to connect folks or happy to continue the conversation about food in prisons or food in reentry at any time. So thank you so much again to the panelists, and Matt, turning it back over to you for the final announcements.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And I'll echo that to thank all of our presenters for, really sharing experiences and wisdom and also practical insights and strategies. I know it's impactful. And so and thanks to Leslie too for moderating the conversation. And so I'll just briefly say we have our final session of Ecologies of Justice coming up next week at the same time. This one is on some examples of documenting and researching different kinds of programs or interventions in prisons and reentry contexts. And we have a number of presenters and teams, really research teams on applied research, not just kind of theoretical, practical and applied approaches to research. And so we hope you'll join us for that final session. And thank you again to the attendees for your questions and for joining us. And we hope to see many of you back with us next week. So thanks everyone, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.